Okay, so we're back with the last steps of this 7-step process. As I said, it's just a way to summarize all the different sorts of informations that you can get from a quadratic function when the a and b and c is given. So the last thing we did was to calculate the vertex, and if you zoom in here, we got a point for it. The vertex point is -1, 4, so the y coordinate is 4. And what about the symmetry? Well, let's talk a little bit about that. As we can see up here, a is equal to -2. So a is a number that's smaller than 0. This means that if I were to graph this graph, let's do it in a little bit non-exact way, in a very sloppy way, it would have to look something like this. It would have to open downwards. Why? Because a is less than 0. So this we have talked about in class many times. And whatever this point here, on the turning point, it's going to have to be a maximum of the parabola. The parabola never exceeds this number. This is the maximum value that this shape attains. So, and that is the vertex point. So this point in here is always called the vertex. How does this translate to our example? Well, our vertex was -1, 4. So we can write something like this, because a is less than 0. Remember, a was equal to -2. The vertex is a maximum. Maximum is a maximum of the quadratic function. Okay, so this is the maximum. The maximum I'm referring to, this guy here, it's something that would look like this if I were to graph our function in a more precise way. So good, that's all there is to step number 5. Let's do the last two steps. So step number 6 is to obtain the x-intercepts. So the x-intercepts, if we go back to our little sketch here, the x-intercepts would be the points where the graph cuts the x-axis. It's just to have a feeling for the word x-intercept. It intercepts the x-axis, just as the y-intercept intercepted the y-axis. So for the x-intercepts, you will always have 3 different methods that you can choose from. Either the null factor law. The null factor law is what you would get from factorizing, and last year you learned something called the box method. I have taught something called splitting the middle term, splitting the middle. Whatever you can do to factorize your quadratic functions, you can use the null factor law to solve it. If the numbers are easy, this thing can be done, and you have had a lot of practice on it. This year we learned 2 other ways, and both work when you cannot factor. And these 2 methods are completing the square, I'm just going to write completing square, or you can use the quadratic formula. And you should know all of these 3 methods. Yeah? You will be asked to show your knowledge in all of these 3 areas. So for our case, we have the coefficients -2 for a, and b is -4, and c is equal to 2. So let's use the quadratic formula for this one. The quadratic formula says that x is equal to -b over 2a plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac
divided by 2a. So this is a formula that will also be given to you. So this is given. I will write it up on the whiteboard when we are writing the test. So don't try to memorize this if you don't want to. And now it's what I usually call the copy-paste exercise of the century, because we have our values for A, B, and C, and we're just going to pop those in here to see what we get. So if you noticed, this negative b over 2a, that's the same formula that we had for the x-coordinate of the vertex, x equal to negative b over 2a. I know that's equal to negative 1. That's just because we calculated it once before. So I'm not going to calculate the same again. So I'm going to replace this with negative 1 here. Okay. And then it was plus or minus. And we had this square root of b squared minus 4ac. It's going to be a number there, and I'm going to divide it by 2 times a. Well, a was equal to negative 2, so let's see what we get now. Let's do the denominator first. It's 2 times negative 2. A was negative 2. B is equal to negative 4. So negative 4 squared is 16. Positive 16. Don't do this mistake that you forget the negative. That negative times a negative becomes a positive. Minus 4 multiplied by a multiplied by c. So a is negative 2 and c is 2. Okay, so what do we get here? This becomes, well, negative 1 is still going to be negative 1. Nothing will happen with it. Yeah. Then we have plus minus square root. So you have negative 4 times negative 2, that's positive 8. Positive 8 times 2 is positive 16. So we have 16 plus 16. And in the denominator, I get negative 2 times 2, which is negative 4. Here, many students are making mistakes with the negative signs. Please remember that the negative signs multiplied by each other gives you a positive. So I have 16 plus 16. Otherwise, if I would have made a mistake here, I would get 16 minus 16. I would just get a 0, which would give me a completely different answer. So, okay, this becomes negative 1 plus or minus square root of 32 divided by negative 4. And I have done this a little bit beforehand. I am doing the, I know I can put into a calculator, and please check this, that you're getting the same numbers. Square root of 32 divided by negative 4 is equal to negative 1.414. So let's do this carefully now. I'm going to write this in red so that we see what we're doing. X equal to, okay, x equal to, I am here, x equal to negative 1 plus or minus, that's this in blue, plus or minus, and then we had square root of 32 divided by negative 4. Well, I put that into my calculator. I saw that this was equal to negative 1.414. And I rounded the third decimal. I'm only keeping 3 decimals. So I get 2 different answers here. The plus solution gives me negative 1 plus negative 1.414. So negative 1 plus negative 1.414, which is equal to negative 2.414. And then the other solution, the negative solution, gives me negative 1 minus negative 1.414. So negative and negative becomes a positive, so it's actually negative 1 plus 1.414 equal to 0.414. So in order to finish this off, I see that the x-intercepts are, so x x-intercepts are x equal to negative 2.414, y will be equal to 0, because it's the x-intercepts. I could also write this as negative 2.414, comma 0. Usually I want you to write it in this way. And x equal to 0.414, and y is equal to 0 as well. It's always equal to 0 when I'm at the x-intercepts. So I have 0.414, comma 0. So these are my two x-intercepts, here and here. And this was to finish up step number 6. And step number 7 is to graph it. So we're going to graph the quadratic function. And for that I have printed this nice little coordinate system. And the activity is to graph the quadratic formula without doing a table of values. So here I have from 0 to 10 in each direction. I have from 0 to negative 10 in the x direction, and from 0 to positive 10 in the positive x direction. So x just goes from negative 10 to positive 10, and the same for y. So the x-intercepts, let's do the x-intercepts first. I have negative 2.414 and 0. So negative 2.414, negative 1, negative 2, negative 2.414 is going to be somewhere around here. 0.414, comma 0. Well, I have x equal to 1 is here, so half of that is 0.5. It's going to be somewhere around here. Okay, so I have these 2 points. What else do I know about my quadratic function? Well, I know that the y-intercept is 0, 2. So x equal to 0, y is equal to 2. So let's put that in here. When x equal to 0, y is equal to 2. That's going to be up here. Okay. Let's see what we can do more. The vertex is xy. The vertex is at negative 1, 4. So x is equal to negative 1 and y is equal to 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4 up here, and negative 1. So that's here somewhere. So because it's the vertex, I know that my axis of symmetry is going to go through this point. So axis of symmetry is here. So the axis of symmetry is just x equal to negative 1 in our case. So everything has to be symmetric around this axis. So whatever I draw on one side, I also have to draw on the other side. So in the best of worlds, these two are mirror images of each other. Something like this. So we have graphed our function with all the features of it, and we didn't use a single table of values. Now, this seemed like a very long exercise, but that's just because I tried to put as much information as possible into the same thing. You will be asked a set of questions within this 7-step process for the test. Okay, thank you, bye.